Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic Bonanza. It is Thursday at about 10 o'clock, 10:02 to be specific. So, yeah, hope everyone's doing good. Thanks again. Got some new subscribers that just recently joined on within the last few days. Super cool. I love that there's other people interested in these weird and wacky movies and my strange coverage of these beloved films that I love. Before I get into this movie, which I'm super psyched to talk about, on the music front, we're going to be doing on Monday for Quantum. We're going to be doing a show at the Myrtle Street Tavern in Rockland, Maine. Myrtle Street Tavern has been a club, or I should say a bar, that has had entertainment for years and years and years. The As far as I can remember, it's always been here. It's always been, I don't know. I always considered it to be I don't know, like a local dive bar. I used to play in a band called the 220s quite a few years ago, and at one point I'd played there. And this is going back quite a few years, but at one point that band was playing there pretty regularly, and we were playing there a couple times a month, and then we were playing shows like around the holiday season. We do like a St. Patty's Day show. St. Patrick's Day is tomorrow, of course. We would, play there on, the night before Thanksgiving or around Christmas. We would do like Halloween shows there. But we were like in a rotation there for a while. The And then before that, I played there maybe a handful of times, like pretty sporadically, with a couple of different bands. But it wasn't until I was in the 220s that we got into a regular rotation there. And I always really loved playing there. And I've gone to see lots of bands there over the years. And back then, the Myrtle had a really, rough and tumble reputation. It was definitely a dive bar, and people would get pretty shit faced, and it would get pretty crazy. I saw some incredibly crazy things happen there over the years. But recently, and typically too, what Myrtle always would do is like on weekends they would book, more or less like classic rock bands, lots of cover bands, party bands. But they would have like these loud kind of classic rock bands play on Saturday or Friday nights, and then they have like a karaoke night and they have a pool table. But they would typically kind of stick to that kind of formula, and it was always successful. That place was always, it was always busy there. Every time I, happened to play a gig there, or anytime I went to see a show there, it was always busy. It's a tiny little dive bar, but it had a reputation for always having live music. They'd always have pretty good bands, in that genre, and it was always a good time. The beers were cheap, the drinks were cheap, and very strong, but it had a, it's right in Rockland, so it's real centralized, so it's like walking distance, you know, uh, for everyone who lives in that area. But about 3 weeks ago, or actually I should say a few months ago, I think a few months ago, Myrtle Street had closed for a little while, and I think it was bought by someone else. I'm not totally positive, totally sure. And a couple of the bands that I play in were approached about maybe playing there, and there was this new series that they were looking to do, where they were going to have, I guess you could say they were looking for like alternative bands to play there that they, styles of music that they don't normally get there. And then so they started doing, they had this idea of doing this series of having those kinds of bands play there on a Monday night or some alternate night. So a band that I play in which is Bone Broth, we ended up playing there, and it was on a Monday night. And I was really surprised that we got a gig there because Bone Broth isn't really. I mean, we're definitely a band that has a rock sound, but we're not like a classic rock band, and it's not a cover band. That band is pretty different, special because it's all improvised, and we do, I don't know, pretty a pretty eclectic thing. I think to a degree. There's world music. There's definitely jazz. There's some of the fusion thing going on, the gypsy thing, funk, hip hop. So there's it's a crossbreed of all these different styles. So and but it's all improvised, and it's not like classic rock. It's not. It doesn't resemble that kind of thing at all. So I was really surprised that they booked us there, and I was like, wow, like wonder what that's going to be like, because it was kind of a band I never thought would really play there, or whatnot. So they ended up booking us there, and we played, and I was really surprised because they redid the whole place. The bar now is this big wraparound bar. They expanded the actual area itself, and they cleared out even more area, so there's more space for the bands to set up and play. And they actually have a food menu now. It's still got that vibe, but it's more. I don't know. They did a really nice job, and we ended up playing there, and it ended up being a pretty fun gig for a Monday night. And in considering the music that we do, which is really really different than what they typically have, and they during that time when the gig was booked, they were booking other things. So lo and behold, we ended up getting a Quantum gig there. So we're playing there on this coming Monday at 8 to 10. So we'll see. I mean, again, I'm really surprised that it happened. It's a place that I never thought we would be playing at, especially the music that we do with that band. So we'll see. It's a new venture, but it's going to be on a Monday night, 8 to 10, and we'll be doing like a 2 hour set of our original electronica. So we'll see. So if you're in the area in Rockland, come by and check it out. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we don't get shut down, or maybe it will go over well. Maybe there'll be people there, maybe there won't be. I mean, who knows? It's like that with any gig. You just never know. I think playing gigs, I think there's a certain thing around where if it's an event that your band is playing in, or if something that you're, like for me, I love to go see live music. So if it's something that you hear a lot about, and there's like a buzz about it, generally for the most part, and if it's in a good time slot, and maybe there's not all these other competing events, generally like you'll get a pretty good crowd. But even that, it's every gig is different. I think for me, you go into every gig, starting from zero. You just, you try to put on a good show, and you try to, give a fun, present a fun time, and hopefully the material's there. But it's, you're always in the great unknown. But it's especially like when you're doing things like this, where it's, a place you never thought you would be playing, and so we'll see. But I'm excited. So today's movie is definitely a quintessential movie in the world of exploitation. It's definitely, I think, within the world of exploitation, it's probably one of the most popular movies. I think people who are not, like, say, invested or are generally fans of exploitation, like me, know of this movie because it's such a popular. I don't know. It's kind of evolved over the years into a film that is part of like pop culture. I've always heard it referenced in various things. Even certain in other movies growing up. I've always heard it talked about. Lots of people, lots of reviews, lots of different people who review films and critics have talked about this film, who cover all kinds of movies. And I feel like it's an American movie, and I feel like it's one of those totally weird movies that somehow became part of like the American fabric. And that is this movie, the one and only Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I have this on VHS. One cool thing is I had done a show about my VHS player and my DVD player dying, and finally I was just giving up on the world of VHS, because I actually have a really good selection of VHS tapes, and they're in good quality. But I did a show, like a memorial tribute to my VCR player and my VHS collection, because my player had pretty much died. And I don't have any desire at all to buy more VHS tapes, or, I kind of thought, well, when this player goes, that's going to be it. Because now I just buy Blu-rays. Occasionally, once in a blue moon, I'll buy DVDs, but everything now is Blu-ray and 4K. But I have this on VHS, and lo and behold, my VHS player actually works still. I messed around with it. What had happened is it had was started to eat one of the tapes. I couldn't get it out, and it got stuck, and then the whole thing shut down. But I was able to get the tape out, and it seems to be working again, so it's pretty funny. But I have this on VHS. This is definitely a movie that eventually I need to get an upgrade, because like again, I think that this is one of those movies that is definitely a definitive exploitation movie, science fiction, horror exploitation movie, and it's an American movie, and it's one of the most popular movies of all time. And it's funny because of how incredibly low budget this movie is and how completely ridiculous it is. But also, it's such a good satire. It's got all of these great plays and takes where they poke fun and talk about, to a degree, social issues, political issues, social issues that were going on, things around war, how people are as a society, consumerism. It actually deals with a lot of cool subjects, and it's a very satirical way. It's like I feel like the bedrock of this movie is it's a satire, but it really talks about a lot of serious issues, even though the movie itself is so completely absurd and ridiculous. So it has a cool balance. Like it's able to talk about, and to a degree discuss, without it being too heavy-handed. It's able to kind of tackle pretty serious issues that we deal with as a society and as a people. Whether it's from a domestic perspective or a global perspective, from our country and how we are as Americans, and our place as America as a global empire. It deals with all of those subjects and talks about them, and it's never heavy-handed, and they're serious. Those are very serious subjects, but yet the movie strikes this balance of where it's so cheesy and ridiculous and absurd. So it's got this great balance, and it's one of those rare movies, I feel, that actually does take on those subjects that are pretty heavy and things that you need to actually think about, and that, to a degree, for some people, those are hot button issues or red button issues that can send people off. Whether they agree, or they're on the progressive side of things, or they're on the more conservative side of things. But this movie does such a great job with handling all of that. And again, like I said, it's never preachy, but it's just so entertaining. And the other movie that this reminds me of, that I feel is another example of an exploitation movie, that is a movie that is so popular, and it's one of those movies that people who might not have, like I said, might not have invested any time in the world of exploitation know about. And I feel like that other movie is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Like that's a movie that is just so well known, a total exploitation movie, but so well known, and it's part to a degree of like pop culture. And I kind of feel like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and Killer Clowns from Outer Space are two movies that somehow have like permeated our history. Whether it's even to a degree not just our film history, but our social history, and things that we gravitate towards on the the popular scale of American society, especially contemporary society. It's pretty funny how something so utterly ridiculous becomes so well known. And initially, yeah, they're cult films and they have this hardcore rabid following, but the appeal of these films is actually, I feel, so so massive, you know. And this movie, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, came out in 1978. It's labeled as a horror comedy, and again, it's so utterly ridiculous. It's super funny. It's such a great satire. It was directed by John De Bello. John De Bello was a pretty famous actor, actually, in the world of exploitation. But he was responsible for directing this exploitation masterpiece. And like I said, it's one of the most iconic movies. There's also a sequel to this film, Return of the Killer Tomatoes. This was also eventually turned into a massive franchise. A remake, Killer Tomatoes, in '91. Then there was a follow-up that came out in 1992. The original was 1978. This movie here, Black Dawn, 1997. These are films that he also directed and starred in. John De Bello. Happy Hour, 1987. Nightlife. Cast a Deadly Spell, 1991. He also directed one of the Amityville horror movies, which is wild. The Survivors, 1983. Definitely like a director and actor from the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. John De Bello was born in 1952. He was a producer and director, most notably known for The Attack of Killer Tomatoes, which was released in 1978, Return of the Killer Tomatoes in 1988, and the Killer Tomatoes are back in 1991. Just hilarious. And he, was a very well respected and pretty well known mover and shaker in the world of exploitation. Um, and again, like I said, this movie is definitely something I need to upgrade. This is a really good quality VHS. I got this film, I got this copy of it, this VHS copy, from my friend Charlie Hendrick, who I've talked about before on this channel and in various videos. He was definitely one of those guys that was played a real pivotal role for me as far as really getting into film and getting into weird films, a lot of exploitation movies. One of my all-time favorites, Private Parts, which I did a movie on, a show on way back when, which is one of the most bizarre movies ever made, but one of my all-time favorite exploitation movies. He turned me on to that film, and I got a whole bunch of movies from his collection when he had moved away, and we used to hang out and play music together. We were in a couple of bands together over the years. We had one band in particular called Tit City, which was the first time I ever was really in a group that was, so called like electronic. And we used to hang out, watch movies, and he is a total, uh, you know, I mean, he's at a level that I feel like he could. I've always felt Charlie's at a level of, has so much knowledge around film that he could probably, you know, teach it, at a college. And I remember at one point, like we were playing music together, and we would hang out a lot and watch movies. That was a regular thing that we would do. But at one point, he actually had a weekly thing at his house. He used to live in Camden, Maine. He would have a weekly kind of get together, and he would show a movie, and it was great. He would always show these like totally weird, obscure movies, and typically a lot of older films. And I remember I would go to it, and we people would bring some food, or he'd make some food and have some beers or whatever, and it was great. It was super fun. But I got turned on to so many movies through him, and he really, like I said, played a real pivotal role in me becoming even more of a fan of film. And he had, when he moved away, he gave me a whole bunch of music, but then he also gave me a whole bunch of VHS tapes, and this was one of them. And I had seen Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, a bunch of times growing up back in the day on VHS, and it would be, on, there were, back in the 80s and 90s, there used to be, a bunch of different shows on cable where they would do like these midnight showings of, they would show, where they would specialize in showing these real, cult-based horror movies, basically exploitation movies, sci-fi movies. And this was one of those movies that was always on cable late at night. And, I just always love this movie. And it's just so cheesy and so utterly ridiculous, but amazing. And again, like I said, it does deal with some serious subject matters, and it's this great balance. Kind of thought-provoking, even though it's so utterly ridiculous. And so when he moved away, and he moved away about 10 years ago, I got a bunch of these VHS tapes. And I got some good ones. I don't have a desire to get any more. Again, like I said, I changed my buying habits radically over the years. But since I've had this movie, I've bought it. I've seen this movie multiple times. I haven't seen. It's funny. I haven't seen any of the sequels or even the remakes, but maybe at some point I will. But this will definitely be one that I need to get an upgrade and get this like on Blu-ray 4K, and I'm sure it's out there. I haven't come across it at all, which is really funny. I'm always kind of perplexed because, like I said, I think it's one of the most popular exploitation movies that crossed over into the mainstream. Killer. The, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, that I see all the time, and I got that. I had a copy of that on VHS for a long time. That was a movie I grew up on. I bought a DVD version of it a few years ago, which was like a collector's edition. That was really good. And then about 2 years ago, I bought that on Blu-ray, and it's really awesome. And that's one of my all-time favorite movies too. But I have never seen this out in the shops anywhere, which I'm always surprised because, again, like I said, how kind of iconic that this movie is. But if you haven't seen this, I'm sure you have probably heard about this film because it's kind of a thing of legend. But it totally lives up to its reputation. It's super weird. It's super funny. Definitely a great sci-fi kind of journey. It's got horror elements. It's a great satire. So incredibly low budget, and so utterly ridiculous. But yet has, for what it is, something to actually say. So, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, 1978, an iconic exploitation movie that is part of the American way of life. So, thanks again. This is Jason Dean. Have a great day, and we will see you next time. Peace.